I want to start telling you what a famous scientist, a guy called Alan Turing, thought about how to figure if computers actually can think like human beings. He thought that we are back in 1950, pretty much. And he thought that in order to understand if computers actually can think, we should try just an experiment, trying to figure if computers can actually answer questions without we realizing whether the answers are coming from a human being or a computer. He thought that if that were possible for computer to do that, that meant the computers could actually think. So, and of course, I mean, you would realize immediately if the sound right now, for example, let's say that I'm trying with this computer, I would figure if the computer is actually answering me or you are answering me, right? So he thought that the experiment should have been, arranged in such a way that we don't know exactly who is actually answering the questions. So we would actually, ourselves as humans, should write down the answers. Let's say that we have, you are asking questions to one person and one computer. You don't know which one is who. And they answer on a screen. So they type the answer. They type. The computer can just display the answer and the human being would type it. But we don't know exactly who is who. And so, according to him, if we would be pretty much confused about that, so if we couldn't really distinguish between the computer and the human being answering the questions, that meant the computers could actually think. That was called like Turing's test. Turing is just spelled this way. Alan Turing. So this was his test to understand if computers actually can think. Now, we can imagine today kind of easily a situation like this, in which we get answers to questions from very sophisticated computers without really probably realizing, maybe, what do you think? Would that be possible, and does this make any sense? Would this be a good test to figure if computers can think or not? You think it would?
Yeah, I watched a video on this.
Oh, you?
Uh-huh. Just like a person.
Okay, well, it sounds like a person, but does it mean that the computer think or not?
I don't know.
Oh, come on, try to have an opinion. Candice?
I don't think it proves that a computer can think. I'm very confused that you can test a computer that way.
Mm-hmm. We would be back to the question of what it means to think, right?
Right.
And you still don't have any answer to this question. Try to challenge this test. Don't make my work too easy. Try yourself. Let's say that you have the time Turing. You want to challenge me somehow. Let's say, wow, this test doesn't really make sense. That doesn't prove the computers think. What would you do?
When they did the test, did it program the computers to, were they just replying? Did the computer create its own answer to
A scientist actually claimed that this test would be unfair to the computers. Why would that be so?
I guess the human already had prior knowledge than a computer?
It's easier than that. Unfair to the computers means that the computer should pretend to be a human. It would be much easier to figure who the human being is, because the human being couldn't process that fast the data. So if we asked very complicated questions, let's say, a very complicated math operation, we would figure immediately who the human being is, because the computer would have the answer right away, and the human being would take some time, right? So, in a sense, the test would involve the computer trying to slow down a little and being much more like at the level of the human being. So this scientist was saying, well, this test is unfair to the computer. It proves too much somehow. Do you agree with this?
Yeah,
You agree with everything. This is not challenging.
that one seems more understandable.
Okay. So would it be unfair to human beings? Could you reverse the issue?
Yeah.
How?
I mean, in the same instance, I guess the computer
Mhm.
gets more questions easier. Didn't have to really think about it. I don't know, because they already had the data.
Okay, let's say that the computer, this is unfair because the computer needs to slow down, right? But how could it be unfair to human beings? What would human beings do that is not totally fair to them in this kind of experiment? You are human beings, so would you feel like you're doing something which is not totally fair? You wouldn't show yourself, right? You should type the answers so that people will just see the answer on a screen. What would this hide about the human being?
I mean, just seeing the words on the screen, why would that be unfair to humans?
Yeah.
Is it because you don't get, well, because humans, they use like hand motions and like speak. When you talk, like how you say it, defines. You could say something in one way, and something that you say in another way, maybe something completely different.
You might laugh too, right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So, what would the computer have to hide? Nothing. So why do you think this would be unfair? It's just a fancy thing? I mean, we don't see anybody laughing or joking or maybe taking some time wondering, or is this actually relevant or not? We are going somewhere, I promise, but
We stop for a moment.
yeah.
We're going to, I think, rotate the sound and then ask you two to move up to the
Because
tables here.
we're trying to record this
So that
for
we
use
can-
later on, and right now, we're not getting anything that you're saying,
Oh, okay.
and that's really a key part of it. So I don't want to change anything you're doing, I just want to change the microphone so I can hear what your questions and responses are. Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm picking you up from there.
Sure,
I just picked
sure.
them up from down here.
Yeah, I'm not sure
We'll just make them
how much we can
more
use this material because, you know, there is no big class. But anyway, it's good to have any.
And here, but, you know.
Oh, that's right, because you get me through this thing, right? So that would be for them.
Okay, there you go.
So, what would it, if you see, for example, the human being, while you ask questions to him or to her, like I'm doing with you, right? What would their attitude show about their capacities? What is the main thing that you might think of that would be immediately evident from just looking at human beings while questioning them? Can you get distracted? Yeah. Can you think something different in what you say? can you think, wow, I wish I were somewhere else right now. I have no idea what this guy is talking about. Can you do something like that? Can I figure it out a little? Yeah. Well, a little, yes. I mean, usually you get the sense of what people are doing. Let's call it freedom for the time being. What is the computer free?
It has boundaries.
Which ones?
But what do you mean freedom?
For example, I mean this one. For example, let's say that I have this computer right now, and I ask him a question right now. I want him to close this thing, and I click on it. It closed. Can he decide not to do that?
No.
No. If I ask him a question, can he decide not to answer? Can he decide how to answer? No, right? Who decides that?
The programmers.
Right. So when you just see the computer doing something as the way it does it, and you see the human beings doing something the way the human beings do it, you might notice this difference. Because the computer somehow is obeying something, which is actually a sequence of 0 and 1. I mean, overall, after all, this is what we have in the computer, right? We have electricity, not electricity, right? That's the way it works. It's amazing how fast that can go, but let's go back to, I'll go back to this later. But right now I just want you to try to visualize the difference in the attitude of the computer and the human being. There is a very interesting philosopher who kind of challenged Turing with an extremely interesting thought experiment. His name is Searle, and he called this thought experiment Chinese room. Have you heard about this? Okay, you heard. Do you remember something about it?
I don't remember what it was. I just remember the name.
You're just not even guessing? I mean,
No.
oh, okay. Well, that's too bad.
Chinese what?
Chinese room.
Room.
Room. Yeah, Chinese room. So it's really it's brilliant because it's so simple. So he imagined just to change the language. Let's say that at this point I have questions asked to the computer in Chinese, and so the answers should be in Chinese. But he imagined to be somehow to perform himself the software written in English. So he imagined a situation like this. Let's say that I'm in a room. I'm inside the room. So let's say that this is the room, and here you are, right? This is one of you. Actually, this is you. It's clearly a man. So let's say that you're here, and there is somebody here slipping from the door a question in Chinese. And here you have to give the answer in Chinese, right? And inside the room, you don't know Chinese, but you have the software. So it takes longer than a computer, but you process the software. Receiving this data, clearly the software is able to, whatever signs are written in the paper, you can actually decode those signs into the algorithms of your English software, and then produce the answer connected to the question according to the software, right? So you can give here the answer that the computer would be giving. But the experiment is extremely clever. It wants to assume that you don't know Chinese. So if you perform correctly the software, so you are playing the part of the hardware here, right? Running the software. And you don't know Chinese. You can give exactly the answer in Chinese that the software allows you to give, but you have no clue about what actually the question is and what the answer is about. because you don't really understand what the people asked you in Chinese and what you actually wrote down in Chinese to them. Because even writing it down, it answers very specific software that you are actually performing in English. So this Chinese room experiment is extremely clever. It means that when you just run a software and you use a kind of code, like the binary code, that doesn't mean that you know what it means from the outside or from the inside. So it's not like you are thinking here. You are performing a kind of sequence. So the Chinese room was a big challenge to the idea of artificial intelligence, because clearly here inside the big room, which is a computer, a hardware, basically the metaphor is that this room is a hardware. It's just that we have a guy inside. It's totally blind. It's mechanical. Actually, computers are mechanical. Like the whole point of inventing computer is to have a machine. Is actually the first experiments were mechanical, like going forward and backward according to the 0-1 signals. So it's all mechanical. Computers are mechanical. So this is a very interesting experiment. Actually, do you think that from this viewpoint, I mean, in the light of this experiment and what we said about Turing tests, can you work more on the idea of intelligence, what intelligence might mean?
It's actually understanding it, not just... yeah.
Just going through the sequence. Intelligence is the understanding of a certain subject instead of just doing the sequence.
Right, not just doing the sequence, but understanding it, right? So, would you say that if you are inside the sequence, you are not free? You're not free. You're free if you're outside the sequence. So I want you, for the time being, to just connect the idea of freedom to the idea of intelligence as not sequence, not necessary sequence. And we'll go back to it. Freedom, intelligence somehow seem to go together, and connected also to the idea of the question why, as opposed to just what. Intelligence has the ability of asking why, or wondering about things, not just the what of the sequence here, first, second, third, fourth, I mean the going, so somehow if this is the sequence, the why is above, looks at the sequence from the above, it's a viewpoint on the sequence. Now, in order to be more now to try to build something at this point, because right now we just mentioned Turing tests and a thought experiment by Searle. They don't give really an answer. They're just supposed to, Searle is just supposed to show that Turing tests doesn't really make sense. But it's not like it's telling us anything about what intelligence is or what the computers might actually do. Let's see if we can actually approach it in a way that is more constructive somehow. And I want to do this through another experiment, a thought experiment. Okay, we don't need this anymore. Think of this sentence. let's focus on this possible sentence, this statement. Every event in nature is caused by either by chance or by a strictly deterministic series of events. So, what do you think of this sentence as a kind of statement? If somebody tells you something like this, what do you think?
Well, it's either just random or it's caused by a series of...
Let's say that a friend of yours wants to claim this is the case. What would you say? Does it make sense? Doesn't?
I think it makes sense in a way because just like the series of events would be like seasons, fall, winter, or it just rains in the wintertime. That's just a chance. It still can rain in the wintertime, but it's still a series of seasons that we go through. So yeah, every event in nature is caused by, yes, chance, and series.
So would you agree with this?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so let's call this an event. And whatever here is causing this event, let's call this the cause. So if this is the cause and this is the event, what do you think now about this sentence? Do you still agree with what it says?
No.
Why not?
Because you have to have a cause to get an event.
Right. So this sentence is saying that every event in nature is caused either by chance or by a deterministic series of events. So does this event match what this statement is saying?
No, because it's...
Why?
Because it's saying that every cause has an event, I guess. Chance is cause.
Take your time. Just try to focus on it. This is definitely an event, right?
Yes.
So it happened. We wrote it down. Somebody or something is causing it. So what if it is by chance? Let's say that the cause is a computer, actually. Let's say the cause is the computer. So the computer right now is running a software that ends up, like in Turing's test, right? Ends up with, showing on the screen this sentence. And let's assume that this software actually is necessarily forcing the computer, like when I, close my whatever it was, PDF file, so the computer is forced to do that. So once you turn it on here, you click on something, this sentence appears on the screen. So in this case, this event is definitely caused by what? A deterministic series of events, right? Now, let's assume for the sake of arguments, because apparently that's not accurate, but let's say that the computer can run a kind of random software that ends up with this sentence. So, chance, technically speaking, computer is not like random events in nature, right? Random inside the software is still controlled by the software, but whatever, for the sake of the arguments, let's say that this event on the screen of the computer can appear either as a chance event or a deterministic event. So, would you agree with the sentence? Why not?
Well, for a computer,
because we are even assuming that the computer might actually think. So somehow the computer is challenging you with this event.
yeah.
So what do you think?
And it still has to have a cause in a computer.
So what would you tell the computer about this sentence? let's say that the event is different. It's like let's say that this is the event. What's the difference between this one and this one?
The bottom one doesn't make sense.
This doesn't make sense? Why? Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Are you sure about that?
That seems random.
So you're saying that the difference between this one and this one is that this one doesn't make sense, right? But we are assuming that this event is caused either by chance or by a deterministic series of events. So why would it even be supposed to make sense? Let's say that a volcano now erupts a bunch of things, including a kind of chair object thing. Do you think that among all the objects that the volcano is erupting, one of the objects makes sense? Is this even applicable? They're just a bunch of objects erupted by the volcano, right? They're not supposed to make any other sense than being erupted by the volcano. So they would take any kind of shape. It's not like the volcano is erupting one, making sense, and the other one not making sense. Why these two things actually make sense? When and how they make sense compared to the computer? They make sense if the computer is actually working properly. So if you click and the computer is producing this sentence, from this viewpoint, it doesn't change anything about the inside. The only thing is this what the computer was supposed to do? So the computer, why not? Can you actually program the computer so that this actually will be the event?
Yes.
So would it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's exactly what you want the computer to do, right?
Yes.
If you wanted the computer to produce a random thing, isn't this random enough?
Yes.
It is random, so this is what the computer wanted to do, so was supposed to do. So both events, from the viewpoint of the computer, they make sense exactly the same way. Actually, what didn't make sense is that you tried to answer this question as if it were supposed to make sense from the viewpoint of the computer. So you made this mistake because you're not computers, so you were not thinking enough.
So the computer's smarter than us.
Well, I mean, at least I'm smarter right now. I'm not sure about the computer, but you didn't think enough about this. So from the viewpoint of the computer, if these are the two alternatives, chance or deterministic series of events, it doesn't matter at all what the statement means. What matters if either that the series of events was performed correctly, or that it was actually a chance event. A chance event can be a rack, can be a nonsense letter, can be anything, but you cannot wonder what it means as a sentence. So I hope this is clear enough, right? Because there is only one possibility for this to make sense as a sentence. If you are saying this sentence, I start talking to you. If the computer gives me this sentence, I don't care. Because the computer would tell me this sentence either because of a software forcing it to do exactly this, or as a chance event. Why would I argue with the computer? right? But there is only, so chance is not an option to wonder what this sentence means, and above all, if it is true. Because if this event is a true event, truth event, means that I can wonder whether it is true or not. Sorry. So I can wonder whether this is true or false, not if it is by chance, not if it is a deterministic series of events. What's the other option? Even in this case, it doesn't make sense for me to wonder whether this is true or false. Because it is true if it comes from the computer compared to the software. As in the Chinese room, this was a true answer insofar as it was the answer required by the software. So if you are inside, you can tell, if you perform correctly the software instruction, you can say, yes, from the viewpoint of the software, this is true. Whether it is meaningless or not, I don't care. So from the viewpoint of the sequence of the deterministic series of events, it is definitely true if it is a correctly performed sequence. But it might say something completely meaningless. It doesn't matter in any way. From the viewpoint of chance, if it is by chance, yes, from the viewpoint of chance, it's a true chance event. Who cares what it says? So, but if I really want to wonder about the meaning of it, what should be the cause? Try me. If you said, let's say that now we don't have the computer here. You have, we have, how do you spell your name? C-O-N-O-R. C-O-N-O-R?
2 N's.
Okay. Okay, Connor. Let's say that Connor is the cause now, not the computer anymore. So here the cause is Connor, and this is an event caused by Connor. He's actually pronouncing this sentence. He's saying that. He's claiming that this is true. So, what kind of cause do we have here that is not chance or deterministic? What's the other possibility?
Force. Yes, force. Force, like force to...
Force? Like he's stronger and so he can...
It's not another cause.
We're actually talking about him, right? He's saying that. So what kind of cause would you call him?
Supernatural.
No. Let's say that I want to argue with you about this sentence. You are the guy who is saying this sentence. Why would I argue with you? What kind of cause do I need to argue?
It's not true. It's not being true. It's not true.
Oh, come on, you don't... I even wrote it here. You had just two possibilities here, right? Freedom. Why am I stressing so much freedom? Because if I argue with him, it's because I think that he can change his mind. I wouldn't argue with the computer. I mean, I would argue with the guy who is writing the software, maybe, or, you know, I would break it if I don't like it, but why would I argue with the computer? He cannot do anything about this, right? He's not free. If I argue, it means that I take it for granted that I have a free agent, a free mind in front of me, a mind that can actually work with me through what is true and false and change its mind. You don't have any reason to argue with somebody who is a slave of a sequence or chance. I don't ask the volcano, oh, why did you erupt this object instead of the other one? What kind of question is this? I should be crazy to do that, right? I argue with people who are free. I need to recognize them as free, otherwise I don't talk to them. This is something that you do spontaneously. Your mind knows that you don't need to talk to people who are not free. You know that. That's exactly what you do. You don't talk to your cell phone. I mean, you shouldn't, right? You talk to people through your cell phone. But if the cell phone doesn't work properly, it's not like you try to convince the cell phone to work properly. I mean, you don't need me to explain this to you. This is exactly how we approach people, how we approach entities we want to engage into a conversation with. So we recognize spontaneously that they are free, and that's why we talk to them. So freedom, we need to know that something they claim as a true statement is actually caused by their freedom. And so I can work with freedom. We can both work with freedom and figure what's true and what's not true. Of course, freedom is a viewpoint on something. We need to look at something and figure, does this really make sense or not? So what does our actually intelligence tell us about this sentence? At this point, if he says that, not the computer, because the computer, from the viewpoint of the computer, this is true no matter what it says. But when this sentence is something you are saying as a free agent, when Connor here is a free agent, at this point we can wonder whether this makes sense or not as a meaning. We focus not anymore on the event, but on its content, on the meaning. And so what about the meaning? Does this sentence make sense at this point or not?
Yes.
Does it does make sense?
Yes.
Really?
I mean, everything.
Does it make sense?
Not everything. No.
We have been dealing with one event which is not caused by chance or by determinism, right? Determinism is a necessary mechanism. Once you get the first step in the chain of events, you necessarily have the outcome, the last step. So you know that when something happens, the other thing follows necessarily. If I drop this right now, it falls down. This is determinism. You cannot just decide not to fall down. But we have a third possibility, right? Which one is the third? I mean, that event is a third possibility when there is a human being claiming that, saying that. Which one it is? Freedom, right? So that sentence is mistaken. It's false. So if this were a test, you should just write false. Because it's actually a contradiction. As a truth statement, it's a contradiction. As a blind event, can be fine. Because as a blind event, it doesn't matter what it says. Meaning is not applicable. Intrinsic meaning, extrinsic meaning is applicable, as it is applicable to the nonsense sentence we wrote before, right? Because that does have a meaning as a result of a sequence or as a chance event. It does have a meaning. You just compare it to the cause. If the cause is chance, it does make sense. It's random. It's an event by chance. If it's deterministic and the programmer wanted the computer to speak nonsense, fine. That makes a lot of sense. You did exactly what you wanted, right? So from the viewpoint of the computer, these two things, this event makes sense without the meaning. But if you focus on the meaning, it would make sense only through freedom. So freedom is the only possibility to get into the meanings of things. This is exactly what this experiment was showing that the computer cannot do. The computer is actually a slave of a series of events. The computer, whether, it's 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, whatever it is, right? But the computer is just a slave of this. It cannot make a decision. You can start, following this reasoning and then start thinking about something completely different. You might start thinking of the lady you like, or the boy, your boyfriend, or maybe your brother who really did such a stupid thing and you are pissed off, or whatever it is. Because you are not like the computer. Once you turn the computer on and you click, you go just one way to the event at the end. You don't have a kind of operative system working just one way. So somehow freedom means that you are above any kind of sequences. So freedom means that you are totally transcendent, somehow, to use a very complicated, sophisticated term, compared to any kind of necessary sequence that you might have. So how can the computer be freed that way? Because when you wonder, when you focus on meanings, you're doing something completely different than just starting a sequence. Your reasoning is a sort of sequence, but reasoning is not a necessary deterministic sequence. Is actually a different thing. It's a way to look at reality from the above. Does this make sense? If you don't ask questions, I'm worried about going on with this, right? So at this point, if somebody asked you, so can the computer eventually start thinking? What would you answer?
No, because it doesn't have freedom.
Right. And how can you argue for it? Let's try me. Now I try to claim that computers are actually intelligent. We are gonna have the matrix stuff and the future. What's the other movie about the computer thinking? The one with Schwarzenegger, the Terminator. Future with machines thinking like humans. So what would you tell me about to try to convince me that computers cannot actually think?
Because they just follow a set of ordered thing. I guess they just follow commands. Basically.
You should just figure. Well, first of all, a computer that doesn't really obey my commands would be useless, right? Imagine that I click on something, the computer just start walking away. Or it just gets an ice cream, or just insults me somehow. That wouldn't be a good computer, right? But let's assume that, for the sake of this argument, that the computer would actually do that. On what grounds? What does the computer have inside that would allow the computer to go beyond the 0 and 1s and the electrical signals? There is no reason to assume that there is anything inside this machine that can actually be free from the sequence. It would be like it's like. Have you tried sometimes this? Well, I'm sure with the 3D stuff, you tried the color glasses at least a few times, right? Let's say that you have a red color glass. Would you be free to see other colors? Everything would be red, right? So reality becomes univocal from that viewpoint. Everything is red. It's different kinds of red, I mean different intensity, but everything is red. If you see everything red, you're not free to see other colors. So the computer does only work with algorithms and 0 and 1s. So it cannot see reality differently. But we can. That's exactly why the Turing tests was unfair to humans, because we are free precisely because we are not slave of a sequence. So our freedom is wondering about things. We might look at the computer and start thinking about entirely different issues about the meaning of the universe and our role in life, and we go much beyond that sequence. So at that point, we are humans precisely when we show signs of going beyond the lines, coloring outside the lines, even laughing. You cross the artificial intelligence book and start reading, I don't know, Twilight, or whatever it is. This is a sign of intelligence, actually, because intelligence is focusing on meanings, is understanding why, not what is going on, but why. You need to get inside this sentence to get the meaning, not outside. The computer produces this sentence staying outside. That's why it doesn't matter what it says, what the sentence says. It's not true false, it's just an event. But we get inside. Intelligence comes from Latin. It comes from these two words, intus legere. Intus means inside, legere means to read. It's like to read inside things. That means to get into the meanings of things, what they are. Let's switch from computers to animals. What's the difference between, I love this example, I love the beavers, because they are so smart, but they, like the computers, they don't know what they're doing. So they can build dams, which actually took, apparently, I talked to some friends of mine who are engineers and architects, and they did some research in the past on Google and stuff. Apparently, for us to understand the structure of dams, the dams that beavers can actually build, took really a long time. I mean, it was kind of recent for us, recent discovery to figure exactly all the techniques that beavers can actually use, because they can calculate the currencies in the river. They can decide. They can work their way, the best possible way through the kind of wood they use and the trees where they fall down and how they, these dams are actually their homes. They are very well done. So it's not easy to do the same thing ourselves. So in our history, we don't just have the dams. Before having dams, we have a bunch of schools of architectures and engineers, and we have all these maps and libraries and all the drawings or stuff from the past. I mean, there is a history of how to get to the right dam for us. But now, unlike the beavers, we can build dams which are like science fiction dams, right? We probably don't even have a direct experience of how complicated and fascinating they can be. Sometimes in the movies there are, but they are actually fascinating things. But beavers can do that without actually knowing what they are doing, which is extremely interesting. Our approach to reality is not like, you see the tree and you just, you see the color, you smell it, you touch it, how, strong it is. It's not like just a sensory knowledge. It's not like we use the tree like the beaver does. in a kind of default mode. I mean, the beaver just knows how and where to cut the tree, so the tree can, I don't know if you actually figured, that's very complicated. To make the tree fall down where you want it, if you try to cut the tree, it's not easy at all to make it fall where you want it to fall. So it's actually very dangerous, because you might have it fall just on yourself. But beavers know how to do that. We can't. So beavers can actually work with reality, and they are very successful, more successful than we are. If I tried right now to build a dam or to cut a tree, I would be much worse than a beaver. But unlike the beaver, when I call the tree a tree, that's a huge thing. The beaver doesn't call the tree, doesn't give a name to the tree. Giving the name to something. I don't know if you really, I don't know if you're Christians or not, but there is this very obscure passage in the story of Adam and Eve. Adam, actually, in that part of the story, in the Garden of Eden, in which the Bible says that he was so smart in that, moment of creation, because he did have some kind of supernatural power. He was so smart that he could give the right names to things. So intelligence is associated in the Bible to giving the name. He could give the names to things. So I don't know if you actually have ever thought about this passage, which is obscure somehow. I mean, why giving names, the right names somehow, to things is a sign of being so smart and intelligent? Well, actually, giving the name is key. When we call the tree a tree, we are actually, doing something which is kind of cosmic revolution in the events of the entire universe. We are actually, if this is, the entire things existing, right? When I give a name, I figure that something here is something different than everything else. So I kind of identify the borders of what it is, and I give a name to it which is different. Is tree like this? I keep forgetting the spelling of tree. It's silly, but I'm not American. I mean English. So to give a name is like to put the borders around something. And you see, this thing, for some reason, which is something inside, I write it again, right? Inside, that I can read. I'm able to see the meaning inside, so I put the border and I give a name to this, making it different than everything else. I call this a tree. And then I call this, grass, and I call this a cat, and this one lion. I'm distinguishing everything from everything else, giving it a name according to what? To what they are, to their meanings. And what they are is about how they act in this existence as different than anything else. I call the lion instead of a tree, because the lion is actually something that operates in a different way. It does different things. So I give it a different name than the tree. And the more I can distinguish stuff, I give more names. And we can talk about electrons today, and protons, and strings, if they exist. I mean, this is still a theory, right? But we give names to things because we understand what they are. And once we give names, we start an entire new dimension of reality. We work at the different level, at upper level, the intelligence level, in which we actually abstract from the particular thing, from this tree or from this lion or from this tiger, and we work with an abstract concept. The name is actually not naming this particular tree, it's naming a concept of tree. It's what the beavers cannot do. They cut the trees, but they don't know what they are. They don't name them. So if one particular tree, let's say that you are the beaver, and you cut this tree, and the tree doesn't fall down, because we actually put some kind of invisible cord to hold the tree, so the tree doesn't fall down. So if you are the beaver, what you would probably do is to try to cut it more, and then you start, going around the tree, and then after a while, you will just go to a different tree and start doing the same process. But if you were a human being who actually named the tree because you know what the tree does, you gave the name because you know what it is, you know how it acts in life, in existence. So the tree is supposed to act this way, and the rat this way, the lion this other way. If they don't, I'm going crazy. I would stay there weeks to figure why the tree is not falling down. Because I don't know the tree like the beaver. I know the concept of the tree. I know what the tree is. And going to this level, it's a cosmic revolution. The intelligent being is the only being that can raise himself or herself above everything else, above the sequence of the computers, and just asking from a kind of freedom viewpoint above everything else, without any color glass, without any kind of things that will force you to see reality just one way. And you can actually understand what they are and judge them for what they are. This is a tree, it should act this way. This fire should act this other way. And I know the why of things, so that's why I don't change tree. I need to figure why that tree is not falling, because otherwise my entire understanding of trees doesn't work anymore. So if something doesn't work as I expected it to work, I need to find the reason. So intelligence needs the reasons why things happen. So we start reasoning. Okay, let's take a break. How long did I speak? Okay, that's not that bad.
Heavy duty, huh?
Yeah.
So I'm sure you're going to study some philosophy eventually after this class. So how many students are enrolled in the class?
8.
8.
Was it a whole class on artificial intelligence at STMA?
Yeah, it was. It was the limits of technology. It was called. And I think he called it Chinese box or something. It was a little different.
Same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's amazing how much the weather here can change from one day to the other. I was not expecting anything so cold until November, at least, but any day so cold.
One thing that's very noticeable the last month is that it gets warm during the day, but it's colder at night and in the morning. Actually, a lot of that is very usable because so much of it is kind of lecturing.
I like this system, which you can actually project from two sides, whatever you want from your computer. It's actually cool.
It's like a PowerPoint. If you had PowerPoint or something, you could just put it right up.
Yeah. You can do it now, but I like the setting of this class because this way, if you are sitting this side of the class, I mean, you have your own screen. Mm-hmm. You have people that have the other screen, and
PowerPoint is a
good.
nightmare to record.
Well,
This is tough enough. PowerPoint's even worse. They're typically speakers here and PowerPoint's there. Which one you look at?
right.
So you,
I think that's the same problem. That's the problem with PowerPoint. Completely. I mean, that's why I don't like PowerPoint. Because in effect, it means that people have to choose whether they're going to look at me
right,
or the PowerPoint.
exactly.
I want them looking at me, listening to me.
well, the PowerPoint should be, I think the best way to use it is to hide whatever is coming next. So you show people stuff after you say it so that they will keep looking at it, but you don't show immediately everything, because at that point people will just the story.
You know, in the let's see, well, there's a woman scientist, and there's a kind of evil corporation in this big building.
Tyrone Corporate, I think it's the money boy.
I mean, how many years ago are we talking about?
I don't know. Who was the male lead? Was it Bruce Willis?
Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford.
That was Blade Runner.
Which one?
No,
Oh,
yeah,
Blade Runner.
This is different though. The one I'm thinking of was Harrison
Bruce
Ford.
Willis.
What?
Is it Bruce Willis one you're talking about?
I'm not sure 100%.
Blade Runner is an extremely famous cult movie, but
Yeah,
there is no woman scientist. There is a woman who is actually...
The woman is the robot.
yeah.
The
Yeah.
one who's different.
Well,
This-
Harrison
yeah.
Ford too at the end. I mean, but people don't know that. But
It's not Blade Runner. There's a big battle kind of out in a garbage dump where they've been replacing the old robots with these new robots.
iRobot.
iRobot.
Yeah.
That's not Bruce Willis. That's Will Smith,
Will
right?
Smith is the one.
Will Smith.
Yeah.
Doesn't he fall in love with like the woman or something?
He falls in love with the scientist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He-
And in the
he's
end-
a robot.
What?
He's the robot. Or, no.
No,
his
Will
arm-
Smith is not a
his
robot.
arm. Yeah, never mind.
He does have just
Right.
a fake arm, but
But then the robot, one of the robots in the end seems to, to be
Yeah,
human
yeah, yeah,
because he has
yeah.
actually feelings.
yeah, absolutely.
That's what's,
And should free the other robots too.
Yeah.
So somehow should show the way to freedom to the other robots.
right.
Yeah, it's an artificial intelligence typical movie. There is
Right.
nothing. Actually, from
And typically
this,
bad because it identifies being human with feeling.
well, I mean, the whole thing of actually the robot is asking who he is and what he should do, and he's looking for a mission, for a vocation, for something to do with his life, for a meaning of life. So
Right.
he's not just feeling. But it's very naive. I mean, it's not like, anyway, compared to all the artificial intelligence movies, the core idea of this one is not that great. I mean, special effects and other things are, but, I mean, it's much more nuanced. The Matrix, for example. The Matrix is much more challenging as a artificial intelligence. I mean, it was disappointing. I mean, I don't know if you are among all the people who have been extremely disappointed by, the sequence of the Matrix, the sequels.
The Matrix.
I mean, the first one was so good. I mean, they spoiled the whole thing. They've been consistent with the sort of artificial intelligence idea they had, but they spoiled the movies. I mean, why did they do that? It's
If we did
ridiculous.
a high school class using films and philosophy, how, how would we do it? Would people be able to commit enough time to actually watch the movie and then discuss? Or would you have to tell them, kind of watch the movie on your own and then come and we'll discuss
you'd
it?
have to do it. Like,
Yeah, you have to
yeah.
do it there, everything there.
Uh-huh.
Like
So that
those
means you'd have to,
Like it was one class, like one session where you just watch the movie and
Uh-huh.
they reflect on their own, and then you come back and discuss on the next period. But to ask them to watch the movie,
Yes. So if you're going to do it, that would be tough though, because you'd have a series of classes, but each class would have to be like
Yeah.
at least like 3 hours, right?
Mhm.
And so this is bad enough. This is 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon. So Well, maybe people would come out for a movie.
I think I would. I mean, I would do the movie.
If the movie is good, I mean, why not? I did it a few times with my students at Notre Dame, and they liked it. And actually, sometimes what I did with them was to watch the movie at night with them, and then to talk about it the next day in class. But
When you're inviting a lot of people from different places, though.
yeah, that's not doable. Yeah, it should be like movie plus a class not too long afterward. But people like to talk about the movies, so people can stay even 5 hours. If the movie is good and you start, talking about everything in the movie, I mean, people can just go on forever.
One thing I was thinking about is I'd like to do some kind of donor appreciation event. We just have our donors kind of invited, and each one can bring a friend if he wants, but it would just be to do something kind of fun.
Right,
And
right.
one person suggested, well, maybe doing a film and discussion would be.
I'm actually all for it. I mean, I love to do these things. I mean, it's great. Yeah. Oh,
Push it down.
I didn't realize that.
There you go.
We should talk about that.
Maybe you should. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Are you? I hope you're not confused. I mean, there's a lot of information to process, but now we have a few things we need to focus on, to fix in our mind. By the way, there was an ancient philosopher who compared somehow. I mean, it was a sort of way to approach our process of getting into the meaning of things, like the intus ledger, right? But so he actually compared the understanding, when you really understand something, as kind of closing borders around things, like we did here. And the process in which you don't really understand, like an open, infinite space. So actually, the very original terms used for them were actually related to putting borders to things. If you think about it, whenever you really understand something, it's like you distinguish something clearly in a kind of vague, bunch of stuff you might have, but then you focus on something, you have actually something definitive around. You build a border, and that would make sense. So sometimes when you are confused, it's because you cannot focus on anything, putting some borders around the knowledge. And actually the way he did it was actually, he thought that this guy was Pythagoras. I don't know if you heard about him. He's actually one of the first important guys for mathematics and geometry, right? You have never heard about Pythagoras? Pythagoras, right?
Yes.
Okay, because I was actually shocked. So you know why they were so good with geometry? Because they didn't have our numbers, so they couldn't calculate anything. They had to imagine everything. So geometry was actually a big effort of imagining things. And you know how they were actually writing numbers? You know that? You don't? Let's just guess, rough guess.
How they were writing it?
Yeah. Let's say that you are Pythagoras now, and we are.
Like dots or lines.
They didn't have the pens.
Oh, they just use rocks or something?
Right, little rocks, very little ones, right? So he thought that perfection would have been the so even, uneven, right? Numbers are even, uneven. So uneven are the like 1, 3, 5, right? No.
Even is 2, 4, 6. Odd is 1, 3, 5.
Oh, odd. Okay. So he thought that the perfection would have been with the odd numbers. And the perfection of knowledge is when you actually put the borders. And the reason is that since they were actually using rocks, if you have these numbers, in a sense, it's open. But when you have this number odd, you close it. So basically for him, the odd number was more like indicating perfection. because when it's open, you don't really see. So it was a way to visualize the kind of knowledge, because numbers for him, numbers was everything. So the concepts were numbers. I mean, mathematics for his was everything in nature. So anyway, that's just a nice way to look at a history of philosophy, just to focus on how much our concepts are supposed to put borders in reality. We kind of distinguish, we take a piece of reality, we put a border, we give it a name, and we have a concept. So, but now, for me, it's important that you focus on this process, because intelligence starts with concepts. So concept is a key term for us. Concept is what neither computers nor animals can have. Concept is not, it's like, for example, tree, right? But tree is not the real tree here, right? It's not this one. It's not the other one. It's not any tree. Concept is an abstraction. So concept is something that only can exist in our mind. It cannot exist in the computer, because the computer is just performing like 1-0 operations. So it doesn't know what it's doing when it writes a sentence, as we said before, right? So from the viewpoint of the computer, even the concept of tree doesn't make sense. It's not supposed to. The computer can write tree in the screen, as the beaver can cut the tree without actually knowing what the tree is. But we can't. We actually start wondering about the tree, and we have an answer when we give this concept a name. So concept and name are two different things, because the name is, of course, is a symbol, right? It's something we can write or say. It's just a means to say something. The concept is actually what we have in our mind when we reason. We can figure if this tree can actually burn this way or the other way. We can put together fire, tree, the air condition, the weather condition, whatever, the pressure in the air according to the kind of fire that can actually develop with the trees. We can put all these things together through reasons, but this is what the bricks in our mind are concepts. And concepts are taken from reality into something that is not anymore reality. Concepts are not something we can touch. They are only in our minds. And you cannot even visualize them, because you can visualize the word, the tree. If you think of the tree right now, you can either think of the real tree or of the name tree. You cannot think of the concept. The concept is what you have in mind, is the intelligent kind of brick you have in mind. It's not something you can think of, because it's actually the first thing you have in mind about the tree. You cannot see it through something else. You can see it through the real thing or through the name. But the concept is something different. It's not material. It's something that we have in our mind. So when we actually work with our intelligence, the bricks are the concept. So then we put concepts together and we start reasoning. So the other thing we have is reasoning means putting concepts together to judge things. For example, the tree is bigger than the frog. Whatever. This is a true sentence, true statement, right? Well, depending on the frog and the tree, of course, but generally speaking, the tree is bigger than the frog, right? There are the Chinese little tree, maybe there might be a big frog, I don't know, but generally speaking, that's true. So what is this sentence doing? It's putting together concepts. Like, for example, right? this is a sentence, a judgment. We are judging human beings, saying what they are, and we attach the concept of mortal to the concept of human beings, right? So these are two concepts, human beings and mortal. And we say the human beings are mortal. So we can start reasoning. Reasoning is just walking. It's walking through our concepts, through judgments. So our reasoning is made of statements connecting concepts. So concept plus concept, it's a statement, a judgment, and then we can keep going. Let's say that, let's say, Connor is a human being, right? And so, how does the reasoning end? Right, Connor is mortal. So this is a correct, right? We are going from the major premise to the conclusion because we are actually reasoning, but the bricks we are using are concepts. Concepts applied to the reality we have in front of us, right? Because what we do with abstraction is that we get into what things are. We get the concept and we give a name to things. So we give names to the concept. Then we have something that can be applied to everything else. And so we go back to other things using those concepts. And we reason about things, how things are according to what we know about them. So we can reach other knowledge through our reasoning. So our reasoning is walking from something we already know to something we know through the reasoning. And that would be the conclusion. So this is what our mind does as intelligent beings. But the whole thing, building up the concept and reasoning, cannot be just chance or determinism. That's the whole thing. It needs to be free. We need to be free to look at what things are and to judge them. Every time we judge, remember, human beings are mortal. It's a true false statement if it is the outcome of our free understanding of things, and we actually are saying it as a free agent. That's why we can wonder whether it's true or false, because if it were just a mechanical sequence or chance, true false were not applicable to this. Wouldn't be applicable. I'm connecting this to what we said before, right? So our entire, world in our the world going on in our intellect is free, is freedom. We need to actually go above things. You can also think about it this way. We have two kinds of knowledge. Basically is the sensual knowledge, the ones through our 5 senses, right? And then we have the intellectual knowledge. We have been talking about the intellectual knowledge, right? So concept is about the intellectual knowledge. If you think about it, the main difference, what's the main difference between sensory knowledge and intellectual knowledge?
Physical. Well, I would say physical and mental.
Kind of, yeah. One is definitely physical and the other is not physical. This is one relevant difference. What else? Well, compared to what I just said about the concept.
I mean, you can't reason with just existing. What did I say about the concept? How can we build up the concept and talk about it? What's the process? The breaks are the concepts.
When we get the concept from the reality and we give a name to it, because names are about concepts, right? I mean, except the proper names that indicate just one particular individual, right? But so what did I tell you that we do? How? Because the concept is not this tree, right? It's every tree. So it is an abstraction, right? it's an abstraction, it's abstracted, it's taken from the individual, but it becomes something general. So this process is called abstraction, from the particular to a general thing. The sensory knowledge cannot be abstracted from the particular, it's just a slave of the particular. Can you see what I'm seeing? What I'm seeing, right? No, right? You can see what you see, but not what I'm seeing. So when I tell you what I'm seeing, you understand what I'm saying intellectually. Can I make you know what my hand is knowing right now? How hard this is? No. You know it because you touch some of these things yourself, and you can abstract. But when I tell you what I'm feeling, I'm not giving you my knowledge, right? We cannot really talk about it. When we talk about touching and seeing, we are actually talking about the concepts. We are abstracting from the specific thing. There is no way I can transfer to you my sensory knowledge, right? So, but what we are talking about can be talked about because we are using concepts which are not slave of the particular. So our intellect makes us able to go above our senses and our material reality to actually talk about everything else. So our intellect is kind of above our, physical existence from this viewpoint somehow. I'm not saying that this is a way to prove that we are spiritual. I'm not getting there. I will probably if I have enough time. But this is just to understand that our intellect is working at a different level, at a very different level, and this is a level that you can reach only if you can free yourself from the particular. This is exactly what neither computers nor animals can do. And it's clear because it's qualitative, atomic bomb. Once you do it once, you just operate that way. We are actually beings who act according to a reasoning. We wonder why we do things. That's why we do that. That's why you cannot predict what we're going to do. We don't operate always the same way. Computers, we design them differently, but it's not like, among all these, by the way, this is a bullshit computer, it's nothing special. But I don't know, maybe there are probably a few 100,000 of these computers around. It's not like one of them does have a ring, the other one colors red itself, or another one just wears a hat or things like that. They're just like beavers, right? Beavers don't, have fashion magazines. They don't care because they actually act like their action are just the outcome of a kind of species. We are more than that, precisely because we actually act, make our decisions, our actions, due to our own reasoning. It's like our reasoning makes us free. The outcome of what we are going to do is not necessarily the same, unlike the computers and the animals, because we don't act just according to a kind of mechanism. Our species act this way, and so we act this way. When you have a dog, the dog will always act as a dog. In that context, it might change its attitude, but because all dogs would change their behavior in that context, right? It's not like the dog needs a kind of does have a unique cause of its own actions. We do, because our reasoning does make us free. Being intelligent means that I'm above everything, I reason about things, and then I decide what to do. That's why I cannot predict what we are going to do, because actually we are free, because we are intelligent. So, the concept is the jump from the tree to the concept of tree it's such a huge jump for the existence of a being that can do that. I mean, we are actually the only beings who are actually able to jump this way. And when you jump this way, you wonder, you use the why, you are free from everything else, because this is the level of, in which nature is just deterministic. Nature cannot be free from what it is. The tree will always act as a tree, the beaver as a beaver. We know exactly what they do. If we don't know enough, we'll study more. But we know how the beaver would react even in a very cold weather or in very hot weather. We can figure it out. But we are not like them. We jump here, and from here we can decide to do whatever we want. So being intelligent is actually the wonder. It's interesting that some people think that to train their intelligence, they try to do like computers. I try to calculate more, to memorize more. I mean, but that's not what it means to be intelligent. Don't do that. Don't think that if you train yourself to memorize more data or to answer quicker to kind of complicated mathematical questions, you are more intelligent. That's not intelligence. Sorry, I forgot. It's weird that it's ringing. So it's not like, don't think that means, intelligence means being able to wonder about things and contemplate them. An intelligent person is somebody who is actually even taking some time to put all these things together, keeps wondering. It's not like being fast. For the computer is fast because it's a slave. It can just operate with zeros and ones. Who cares? We can go much further. We can use our creativity and we can contemplate stuff. An intelligent person thinks, wonders, look at nature and wonders, oh, why that thing happens this way instead of this other way. I go outside the lines totally. So that's what it means to be intelligent. So again, it's not about being fast. And the more you memorize mechanically data, you can use your brain as a kind of computer sometimes. You memorize better techniques, using techniques to memorize. I have a friend of mine who is great. He can remember a bunch of words all together. I mean, these mental techniques are amazing. So he trained himself to do that. I have another friend of mine who can give you the exact number of letters that you use in every sentence, even a very long one. You say a sentence, he said 53, 75. You finish the sentence, he just tells you right away. I can tell you, I tried so many times. I mean, we were together, I tried every possible sentence, then I went back to calculate everything. He was great. There is no intelligence there. It's a mental technique. He actually explained to me how that worked. I can't remember, but it's just a technique. So when I see the computer going really fast on some calculation, I'm not impressed as an intelligent being. Not at all. I'm impressed by the beaver because I know who built the computer, a very smart human being. But who built the beaver? Because the beaver is extremely rational. Think about it. The point of getting the concept of things, the naming the tree and everything else, means that things make sense. You get the concept because this thing makes sense. It operates in a way that is different from this other thing, and it makes sense. But when I have the computer makes sense, it's brilliant, it's a very rational object, but I know exactly who built the computer, so this is the effect of an intelligent being, right? Whether it is, Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or whoever, right? But the beaver, I mean, who built the beaver? I think Greg is calling me for the car. Anyway. So, actually, if you think about it, our ability to understand the rationale of nature means that nature is intelligible. It can be understood. So, this computer can be studied because it is intelligible. it's built in a rational way, so I can understand how it works. If this were alien, like from a spaceship, we could actually study it, because we understand it's rational, we figure how it works. So it does have a property of being intelligible, right? And so, but of course, it's not the owner of this intelligibility, right? Somebody else built it, because the computer clearly cannot decide to make itself this way. But it works also for nature, right? Nature is so intelligible. It's extremely sophisticated. But who built it? Again, in the case of the computers, we built it. But in the case of nature, since ancient times, this has been one of the most interesting and more fascinating proofs for the existence of God. Because nature is like a Ferrari, it's like a big computer. It works perfectly. We can predict what things do. I mean, we can predict that this will fall down, because there is something we call the gravity law, which is a way to understand rationally reality, right? So reality is rational, is intelligible. Beavers act in an extremely rational way, but clearly they don't know what they're doing. Their rationality doesn't belong to them as the owners. They don't own their own rationality. So somebody else built them this way. But they build them from the inside. So it's not like putting together some pieces. So at that point we would use more the term created them this way. But anyway, I didn't want to get necessarily there, but intelligence means that the world is intelligent. Not intelligent as the owner, but intelligent as the subject on which somebody else, an intelligent being, operated. So our intelligence, we couldn't look at the world giving consistent concepts, abstracting consistent concepts to things and giving them names, unless the world were rational, were intelligible. When we say that human beings are rational animals, we don't mean that the other animals are not rational. We mean just that we use reason to decide what to do. That's a different thing. We own our own reason. But other animals are perfectly rational themselves. It's just that they don't know it. Somebody else made them rational, as if they were robots, right? But again, in the case of things we do, we are the owners of that rationality. In the case of nature, we need somebody else who actually built it rationally. How much time we have? Okay. So, when Aristotle, have you ever heard about Aristotle? Okay, Aristotle is probably the most famous philosopher in history. Somebody would claim that Plato is too, but I would say that, generally speaking, Aristotle is more famous than Plato, but has been, over centuries. But so Aristotle, when he focused on our intellect, because our main, remember the first question I asked you, what is intelligence? And we are getting there, pretty much, I think. At least it's a kind of, I hope that at the end of this class you will think, well, I have a better idea of what being intelligent means, right? That's what I hope for. But I don't expect you to, walk away with the kind of perfectly nuanced knowledge about all the philosophy of the human beings and the intellect and nothing like that. But at least to have a kind of feeling of wonder about something very interesting about being intelligent. So when he focused on our intellect, he wrote something really striking. It said that somehow our intellect, our thought, cannot have a nature of its own. Somehow its nature is not having any nature, which is kind of playing with words. Why did he say something like that? And the reason is actually fascinating compared to what we were saying about computers and about animals, right? Somehow, think about our sensory knowledge, right? our hand, since it is configured according to the possibility of knowing through touch, cannot see. And our eye cannot touch. Our ears cannot see or touch. So somehow everything in nature is configured in one particular way. And that configuration makes you slave of that thing. So if you are actually configured according to, the hand, you can touch, but you cannot hear, you cannot see, you cannot smell. And if you are configured according to the nose, you can smell, but you cannot see, you cannot touch. If you have the red glasses, you are configured according to red color, so everything you see would be red. If you're configured with 0 and 1, with algorithms, you can just work through algorithms. There is nothing else you can do. You cannot smell. You can act as if you were smelling like a robot, but don't really smell, like in the Chinese room. I mean, some scientists say, I can make this robot act just feeling even the sense of touch. I mean, it will turn it, so you cannot distinguish the robot from an animal. Fine, but it doesn't mean that the robot is actually touching or smelling. It acts as if, like in the Chinese room. But my point is that Aristotle figured that unlike any other forms of knowledge, our intellect is able to understand everything according to their own natures. I mean, you call things tree, lions, and everything else, knowing what they are, not what you are. The hand knows everything according to kind of its own mode of existence. Our eye just sees colors, but our intellect somehow knows everything else according to what they are. Can even know what other knowledge cannot do, the opposite at the same time. We cannot know through touch cold and hot at the same time. The opposites are just opposites, but our mind can actually know them at the same time, can know even can even imagine things that don't exist. So our mind somehow seems to be transparent to everything else. It's like not having any red glass. In order to become whatever other things are, you cannot have a nature of your own, because that nature would force you to see everything according to that nature. So Aristotle said our intellect is special. Somehow it can see everything according to what they are, but that means that somehow it's not configured in any particular way, because if it were, it couldn't see what they are. So he said something striking. Since in nature everything which is material is configured in one particular way, and that way would determine the way it knows, like in the case of our sensory knowledge, like the hand, the eye, the ear. Somehow it's like our intellect cannot be configured with matter, because if it were, that configuration would actually stop any other possible knowledge. So if you think about it this way, our possible way of knowing are mostly univocal, except with the intellect. The intellect is open. It's like the intellect is nothing itself. That's why it can know everything. And that's why Aristotle didn't say that it's spiritual explicitly, but in the passage in which he was, from his work, in which he was actually trying to figure this out, he said, well, the intellect doesn't seem to be blended with matter, because it cannot be configured, otherwise he couldn't understand everything, but he can. And so it means that somehow there is this jump. At this point, I would say that at this point, this jump is also the jump from material to spiritual, where spiritual means not material. I mean, we don't know what spiritual means, except that it cannot be material, because if it were, our intellect couldn't be free to understand everything. So Aristotle actually drew this conclusion without, saying too much about it, but he said, since through our intellect we can actually go here and understand everything according to what they are, and since everything that is at this level of material reality is always configured in one particular way, and that way would impede other ways of knowledge. So if we were, a tree would just know trees, in a sense. So if you are just with that way, you would know according to that way. But here we can pretty much know everything. So he would say that the intellect from this viewpoint goes much beyond matter. It cannot be with matter. That means that when we talk about intellect, we don't talk about the brain. That's a different thing. The brain is definitely something material, it's an organ, but the intellect is not about the brain. We are talking about the different thing. The intellect would be our faculty somehow that operates in us in some way, using also the brain, but or mostly the brain, whatever. I'm not an expert in brains, but we are not talking about the brain. We are talking about the possibility of knowing things and what it involves. And we call intellect our power, whatever we have inside that makes us able to understand things intellectually through the concepts. And this is a big jump. This jump, and this would also be a good explanation of why that means to be free, because if we are not slave of material things when we know and decide what to do, that means that we are radically free. We are really free, because matter would make us slave of matter like beavers are. They cannot go beyond. They are just acting at this level of existence in which they are just following some kind of instincts that nature is forcing them to follow.
2 minutes.
Okay, let me see if there is something really crucial that I really...
Maybe we can summarize here at this point, kind of review.
Yeah. Okay, yes, there is a section I don't want to get into because we don't have time. But, okay, summarizing. We started with the idea of figuring if computers can actually think. And first of all, we mentioned this kind of naive idea by this scientist, which was naive but also very interesting. I mean, at that time was actually very new field of knowledge, artificial intelligence, computers in the 50s. I mean, that was really early to work on these things. But he thought that actually the only difference with the computers and humans would have been like operational. If they actually can seem to act the same way through questioning them and getting the answers, that means that would mean that computers actually think. We saw that this was kind of naive but easily criticized also through this kind of thought experiment by Searle, the Chinese room. And then we tried to get deeper into what that means. I mean, what it means to actually know things according to their meanings, or just having them as the outcome of some kind of other sequence or operation or events. And so we actually discovered that there is a huge difference between actually having just something that is rational, is a kind of event, or having it as a kind of knowledge of the meaning of it. So if you just say a sentence, as a computer does, or a volcano maybe will erupt something with this written sentence just by chance, it's not like that thing does have a meaning. But having a meaning means approaching it from an entirely different viewpoint. So computers can actually even give us one answer, but that answer is true or false according to something different than its meaning from the viewpoint of the software. So if I program the computer so that it will say nonsense things, this nonsense would be perfectly rational because that's what I want the computer to do. So I don't need to focus on the meaning to have that kind of result. And that's what the Chinese room experiment also showed, that I can give correct Chinese answer without knowing what they are, because I don't know Chinese. I'm just operating with the software, which is in English. And I'm kind of putting together the two things. So to have meanings means to go to a different level, not chance, not a sequence of events, but somehow being free from any sequence. And somehow getting to decide to judge things for what they are. And this is the power that we would call intellect. Intellect is exactly the possibility that we have of knowing things for what they are and judge them and wonder about them. And at that point we start reasoning, but in a way that is totally free from everything else. And that's exactly our human attitude to reality, which is definitely not the computer's attitude to reality. Computer is actually mechanistic. So this is exactly the way we can see the computer act. And there is no evidence. Actually, it's also irrational to assume that when I have something like a mechanistic machine like the computers working exactly on this kind of ground, to imagine they can do something that doesn't relate to that ground. So you need to go outside the borders of these things to be free and to judge things intellectually. So intellect from this viewpoint raises us, according to Aristotle, to a different level of reality, which is actually spiritual. And when I say spiritual, I just mean that it's not material, it's something different than material, because material reality is always configured in a particular way. But the intellect cannot have its own configuration. The intellect is not red, it's not hard, it's not soft, it's not smelly, it's anything like that. And that's why it can understand what smell means, what touch means, what seeing means, what hot and cold mean. So our intellect understands all these things. But our senses, because they are configured materially, they would understand just one of these things at the time. So our intellect can understand all the other senses, everything else. Can judge trees and lions, can judge computers, can make computers. Computers are like other things which are slaves of one particular configuration. In their case, it's just the 0-1 configuration, whatever. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but that's not my field, so I just call them 0-1. But they can just do what their configuration allows them to do, and nothing else. So it's not just like saying that maybe in the future computers will be different. That doesn't make any sense. It would be like saying maybe in the future beavers will be humans. I mean, either they're beavers or they're humans. I mean, if they are actually intelligent, we would call them humans. So there is no evidence that the computer can evolve, stopping being a computer. Because if I wanted the computer to actually do like us when the tree doesn't fall, I should imagine the computer will be able to break the sequence without any other reason inside the sequence. The computer should be able to, stop the software, the running of the software, for no other reason that wanted it to stop. And there is no evidence that the computer can do that. It wouldn't be a computer. So, as we do, for example, when we are, studying mathematics, and then we stop and we play video game, right? There is nothing in the sequence that forces us to do that. So, if the computer did it, we couldn't even use it. So, it's not like just we are not at the right moment of evolution in the computer system. It's just that the computers are exactly this thing. They cannot be freed from their own structure, and that's pretty much what we talked about.